It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Ottawa head coach Ryan Dinwiddie reacts to the management change in Ottawa, as well as trying to keep his players focused despite their losing streak.
Adrian's a great guy. He's done a great job. He's been a great communicator. I had some great conversations with him. He came in a few days ago, kind of let me know what was going on. It's unfortunate for Adrian, but it takes a little bit off of his plate so we can bring the next guy in that can focus solely on football. We're going to continue to keep fighting, play for the love of the game. We get paid to do this. We're judged off wins and losses, but they got to find that inner child that loves to go out to practice, loves to go out to compete, loves to be around the guys, and that's where our focus is on. Montreal, take it one day at a time. It's really snowball at this stage, right? And it can turn into, finger pointing. You lose the locker room. I thought the guys have, found ways to stick together, and then that's not easy to do. So I commend them on that. But at the same time, we got to go out there and play winning football. Even with injuries, next man up.
The headlines out there are all about the modern day losing streak. I know that predates you, but do you use that as bulletin board material?
No, not really. I mean, obviously, those players probably can see it in the media. They're hearing it. Just try to cancel out the outside noise as much as we can and just focus on the guys in the building and coming together and finding ways to win a football game.
And as you heard on that sound bite just before, head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks, Ryan Dinwiddie, talking about the future of the team in the short term, about channeling out negativity, not worrying about the modern day losing streak, just trying to keep the room together. First and foremost, the RedBlacks make a change at the top. Explain that for us, Heath.
The Red Blacks announced on Monday that the president of the club, Adrian Sierra, has stepped down in his role as president. He will remain on with OSEG as the president of the OHL's Ottawa 67s hockey club. But this is maybe not so surprising given the 0-9 start to the season, 15-game losing streak combined with last season. Something had to change, and right now they are looking for new leadership at the top.
The optics from the outside, you would think that maybe there was something afoot in terms of maybe he wasn't the right person for the job. Maybe there was some issues the way he was handling the franchise. But I don't get the sense after going through the news releases and the pressers that was the issue. They kind of wanted to get a single focus for the football team, and that was the genesis of why they wanted to do this. It more seemed to be that there was just too many things happening, and they wanted someone that could be just specifically focused on the football team. So Sierra can go back to the Ottawa 67s of the OHL, focus on them. They're getting a new rink built. There's a lot to do with that, with OSEG, which is Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group. They have a lot tied up in that. They need somebody focused. Sierra can do that. And now for the interim, yes, an 0-9 team is going to be, in a sense, without its captain. But I don't think that's going to harm them in any negative way until they make the decision that they want to hire a new president.
Just going through some of the wording of this, they talked about the priority to find a football leader with the experience, the CFL connections, and the track record to help rebuild this club. Makes me think it's going to be someone familiar to CFL circles. And I look at some of the teams across the league, Chris Morris in Edmonton, Wade Miller in Winnipeg, Michael Pinball Clemens in Toronto, Orlando Steinauer in his role with Hamilton. These are people that have a depth of experience in the CFL coming from playing, coaching, or some other form of management within the team organization, being promoted into those president roles. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a familiar Ottawa Red Black, Rough Rider, possibly Renegade, someone with connections to that city and the football franchises there, or certainly somebody that's going to be recognized by CFL fans that has a prominent role and is recognized for their on-field exploits as well as the business operations.
Interesting that you bring up the previous iterations, the Rough Riders, the two-word Rough Riders, and the Renegades, because you're almost getting, especially with the Rough Riders, That's 1996, the last year they played. You're 30 years ago with anyone associated with that football team. With the Renegades, I don't know if there's anyone left from there that is on the docket in terms of who they'd like to interview, because you're looking back another 20 years. I kind of think that what you're going to see is somebody from the rest of the league get promoted. And that could be a current GM. That could be somebody that's maybe an assistant GM, somebody that has familiarity with a football operation and can bring some sort of stewardship, in the sense that where Sierra was multitasking all the time between two different franchises, now you can just have a direct focus. This person is it. Now, there's a lot of presidents going around here. We've got president, we've got Sean Burke, we've got the executive chair and managing partner Roger Greenberg, who runs this operation, managing partner John Ruddy, president and CEO Mark Goody. There's a lot of these people that have that title. Don't get too caught up in all of the terms that will entail. The big thing is that this is going to be the spearhead, the leader, whatever you want to call it, of the exact football franchise entity within OSEG.
One name I'm going to throw out there, and this is just not even a hunch, but somebody that I would certainly consider interviewing that has those CFL connections as well as running sports leagues, is Mike Morreale. Now, he doesn't necessarily have the connection to Ottawa. He does have connections to football in Ontario, and is the former commissioner of the CEBL, which is the Canadian Elite Basketball League. So he has been involved in league operations as well as a long-standing football guy. So that's a name that I want people to remember. They heard here first, if it turns out he's getting interviewed and possibly landing that job.
That would be a great pick. I met Mike Morreale a long time ago. He's a really energetic type of person. He's really good with people, and he has a love and a passion for the Canadian Football League. He would probably have been considered for the CFL commissioner at one point. That didn't work out. He moved on to the CEBL, which is one of his enterprises that's actually doing rather well. The Canadian Basketball League is a great sort of feather in your cap, if you want to call it that. Another name I want to toss out is Mark Cohan, a guy that was a former commissioner of the Canadian Football League, has ties to Southern Ontario as well, is a commissioner right now of soccer, but he could be, I'm sure, swayed by the Ottawa RedBlacks to move over.
There's no indication that this is an urgent need to fill this void either. I believe the RedBlacks and OSEG will take their time and make sure they have somebody they feel comfortable with. Trying to change presidents mid-season isn't necessarily going to turn the franchise around for 2026. They need to align themselves, get somebody in place that can start making those changes for 2027. And a great example of that, as I mentioned earlier, Chris Morris with the Edmonton Elks. They took time to find somebody to fill that role, and he stepped in, laid out his mandate for what he wanted to see the Edmonton Elks become. It took 1 year of growth, but they are certainly where they wanted to be at this point in 2026.
The case of the Elks, that was a management team that looked at their situation, realized that where they were heading wasn't going to be the way that that team was going to become a winner, and had to go back to what they felt was something that had worked in the past. That's where you get a GM that had been a GM with the team a dozen years before, and you start looking around to see what kind of head coach you want. Well, you got a very excitable and intense Mark Killam, who's very good with players. You mix sort of a good group together, but the other thing that they did was they stayed patient. And this is what the RedBlacks are doing with the situation with Ryan Dinwiddie, is they're not pushing the panic button. They're going to hold firm and let this play out. He's got a big contract with them. There's no rush really to get rid of it, because they're going to have to pay it out anyway, which is going to be a big hit.
Ryan Dinwiddie, when he started his head coach career with the Toronto Argonauts, had a few bumps in the road that first season, and there were people that didn't think he was going to be the right fit. And I think back to Mike O'Shea's first season as head coach in Winnipeg as well. There was fans thinking he wasn't the right fit and he should be gone. Buck Pierce in BC last year, given the injuries that they've had this year, he started to turn things around in the right direction and they could still be a threat come playoff time. It takes a season or two for a head coach to really get comfortable in their surroundings and what they're doing. I don't believe that the Red Blacks should be looking to replace Ryan Dinwiddie at this point by any means. Patience is something that they need to consider. At the same time, in 12 seasons since the Red Blacks have returned to the CFL, they've had 3 seasons with an above 500 record. I guess the question is, how much patience do the fans in Ottawa have left?
Well, they did win a Grey Cup in that mix. They went to another in that mix. Patience will be strong enough. And especially there is sort of a care and concern coming out of the Ottawa community, especially because they've been through 2 franchises that went away. They don't want to see this a third time. The Red Blacks mean something to them. They have definitely identified with the youth of Ottawa. That crowd that's there is very young. A lot of other CFL centers, BC is close to them. They're a very young audience. But other centers are trying to figure out, what is Ottawa doing that's attracting people that are under the age of 30 in such large numbers? And that's going to be your core group that's going to carry you forward. If the Red Blacks can continue to do that, and whether this new president comes in 8 weeks or 12 weeks or sometime in 2027, I don't think is going to matter so much. But the thing is, you want to be seen in progression. You want to be going forward. And if the Red Blacks can find that, and this is what Edmonton proved, they went through a lot in the previous 5 years. The crowds dwindled. Now they're coming back. Why? Because there's a belief system in that team that it's going to be not only a winner this year, but it's going to be stable going forward. And that's what you really need. And I think your point about O'Shea in Winnipeg is well taken. Buck Pierce in BC, you're going to find the same thing, that you want solid, good people in the coaching position so that you can carry this for not this season or next, but the years down the road.
I know teams hate to use the term rebuild, but the Ottawa RedBlacks, with a new president, need to look at a rebuild mode. I believe it's a team that's, on paper, they've got talented players, and at skill positions, especially receiver and linebacker, really jump off the pages. What should be strong positions for the Red Blacks, the cohesion isn't there. And sometimes, like we talk about with the Edmonton Elks, just because somebody looks good on paper doesn't mean they're the right fit for that organization. GM Ed Hervey made some drastic maneuvers to try to build up that core in Edmonton, and we're seeing the fruits of his labor now. Ottawa is probably a season or 2 behind in that regard. It's starting to look like that 2024 season, where they went 9-8-1, was a bit of an anomaly over these last 6 seasons.
And you look at some of the player signings that have gone on with Ottawa, and you look at some of the changes that are coming already. And AJ Allen is the one that sticks out to me. A 2-year contract, a Canadian. He's being replaced by Lucas Cormier, who was a draft pick of the Ottawa RedBlacks. What do you do in that situation? What do you want to do? Because you went out in free agency, you signed him, you thought he was going to be a good fit. Maybe he still is. Maybe there's something that they have to change in their defensive philosophy. And of course, they've got a new defensive coordinator, so we'll find out. I think RedBlacks overall, I agree with you that the talent is there, but I think sometimes you need dynamic leaders. And I'm not sure, outside of the head coach himself, who do you point to on that roster that you say is everybody's leader? Darius Pickett, who could have been one of those guys, is now back in Toronto. I'm not sure who else you point to. And as much as we've maligned the quarterbacking in Ottawa, I think that's the number one thing that I worry about with the Red Blacks going forward is Jake Maier. Does he have that dynamic side to him?
It doesn't come across that he does from interviews we've seen, from the way he appears to run the team on the field as well. And you look at those yards per completion numbers, and this could be a bit of a disagreement or an offensive coordinator / head coach not having that confidence to really push the ball down the field with them. But something is off. And he has had a really strong completion percentage, but not completing a lot of explosion plays, if you will. And we saw in that game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers last week, a failure once again to get into the end zone when in the red zone.
Now, granted, he found the doink, which didn't help his cause. The thing that I look at with Jake Mara especially is how many times in the first half does he throw the ball 30 yards and beyond? It's so rare. It's when they're in trouble, when they're trying to come back, when time is short, that's when the ball starts going down the field. Well, you're getting very predictable because your first half of the game is about short passes, flat passes, throw it to the receiver 7 yards down the field. And instead of what Toronto does, you could argue, especially what Calgary does, and even a little bit with what Edmonton does, they don't care. At any point in that game, that ball is going to go over the top, and you better be ready.
Halfway through the season now for Ottawa without a win, and it's tough to see where those wins are going to come from in the second half as well. A tough task this coming week with the first place Montreal Alouettes. I don't know how many games this is going to stretch into. I would be quite surprised if a team goes 0-18 over the course of the season. Often they get the chance to eke out a win here or there, but they've had a couple of opportunities in the first half of the season that they let slip away. So they really need to buckle down now and try to eke out a win or two here where they can.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats, I guess, is your closest comparator. The Ticats in 2003 won one game. It was at home. It was against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. That was it. In that game, Saskatchewan was going for the winning score, had a fumble, and the offensive line decided to lateral the ball around once they got it. Had they just fallen on the ball, Saskatchewan would have easily kicked the field goal to win the football game, and Hamilton might have gone 0-18 that season. The Rough Riders themselves were 1-15 one year back in 1959. They had won 3 games. 2 of them were forfeited because they used an ineligible player. That was necessitated because their starting quarterback was injured, and the coach, who changed the ratio, had to go and play the final 2 games. They won them both, but it didn't matter. Going 0-18, the only real comparator in football that you can point to is the Detroit Lions, and they went 0-16. That was about 10 years ago. Is it a perfect season for Ottawa? I don't think so. I think they're going to blemish it somewhere. But where is it that you find the wins? And this is something that Derek Taylor, I loved how he always phrased this. If you're going to improve, where are you going to find your wins? What teams are you going to beat to get yourself to that new station? The weak sisters in this league aren't many left. Hamilton proved that they're ready to take on anybody. The BC Lions, same thing. Who out there would you point to? And you thought, well, okay, worst records, BC, Winnipeg, Calgary.
They do get the Calgary Stampeders twice over the second half of the season. We saw Vernon Adams Jr. go down with an apparent head injury in the game last week. We don't know his prognosis yet or when.
I can fill you in on that. I reached out to the Stampeders earlier today. I got word that he's slated to be the starter. He should be okay.
All right. Well, that crosses those ones off the list then. The RedBlacks are going to get Vernon Adams Jr. and the Calgary Stampeders potentially twice in the second half of the season. They do get the Tiger Cats a couple times as well. Now, you mentioned the strides that they have made. We don't know the injury extent then to Harrison Frost, but Trey Ford stepped up in relief of Frost in that game and led the Ticats to a victory. We talked about the BC Lions seem to have found the groove now that Nathan Rourke is back and healthy as well. The Toronto Argonauts are in there as well, and that might be an opportunity if you've got a Chad Kelly throwing 4 interceptions type of game, but they need to do something on offense as well to complement if they manage to get some takeaways on defense.
But it's interesting. You talk about the 4 interceptions. Kelly against Edmonton doesn't throw 4 interceptions, and they get blown out of the water. So maybe the formula for the Argonauts to win is to throw 4 picks.
It's funny. Usually that takeaway game, if you're positive in the takeaways, giveaways category, generally you win the game. But we've seen Toronto skewed poorly on the takeaways in a game with those 4 interceptions and 6 turnovers total and still come out with a victory. Anything can happen, but a law of averages says if you win the takeaways, you've got a better chance of winning the game.
It is a statistical fact that teams that win the turnover battle win the game. Now, it's not absolute. I would hazard a guess that 95% of the time, that if you win the turnover battle, you win the football game. And it was fumbles and third down gambles that cost Toronto in Edmonton. The Elks in that second half just ran roughshod. Getting back to Ottawa, yeah, they do have the Montreal Alouettes. They know what is up against them. They also know that the modern day losing streak is up for grabs. They've already passed Shreveport's record of 14 losses. That puts them now in line with the Ottawa Rough Riders 25 as the ultimate worst spot to be. And that happened between the 1920s and the early 1930s. Of course, schedules back then weren't as deep, so that's why many more seasons are involved. You don't want that staring you in the face, but even when asked if that's bulletin material to get these guys scared straight, as it were, Dinwiddie didn't want to use it.
Of course he didn't. And it's one of those situations where media will continue to focus on it. And it's up to Coach Dinwiddie and the rest of that coaching staff to eliminate that noise for the team. If you look at the attitude of a lot of successful teams, they talk about going 1-0 this week. If you have a bad game, you flush it and you move on and you focus on the next one. That's what the Red Blacks need to do right now. They can't sit there and dwell on the 9 straight losses. They need to look at the next game and what do we do to get a win.
And if they can find it anywhere, and the thing is about football, all it takes is a couple of breaks. You could be on the other side of the ledger. Ottawa in 2027, what would this conversation be for us, given that 8 of 9 make it? They're basically 4 wins out of a playoff spot. Technically, they are right now, regardless, because of the way the East has suffered with starting quarterbacks going down. By some miracle, the Red Blacks steal one somewhere and then go on a winning streak. And everybody's going, oh boy, wait till 2027. We just don't know. And this is the hardest part of any losing streak. Even the Elks could talk about it when they were losing all those games in a row at home. How many times did they come within a hair's breadth of winning and have something get to them in the end? And I think back to 8 seconds to go, a kickoff goes out of bounds. Ottawa gets the ball at their 50. They throw one completed pass, kick a field goal, and run away from Edmonton with a win. That happens once in a century, and it just happened during that losing streak.
Well, and you talk about you needing a couple of bounces, a couple of breaks to go your way. They have a dynamic returner in Khalil Pimpleton. If they're close in a game, he can bust one for a touchdown at any given moment. If they hang around and keep giving him an opportunity, he can change the momentum of the game. The defensive backs as well, there's some experience there with somebody like CJ Rivas that can get a takeaway, Alonzo Adai, a number of guys there, AJ Allen that you talked about earlier, where he fits back into that role on the linebacking core, and Lucas Cormier. They've got players that can make plays. They just need the bounce to go the right direction.
I'm Derek Taylor, the voice of the Bombers on 680 CJOB, and I listen to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
I think we can say without hesitation that football is a violent sport. One thing that happened that stuck with me, and I haven't had a chance to really bring it up to you, but let's do it now. The Calgary Stampeders, between their game in Hamilton and the game in Toronto, made no lineup changes. How many times does that happen in a season where a team goes through the game and doesn't have an injury?
It has to be pretty rare. You see on kick return plays, somebody on the special teams goes down. You see an offensive lineman get rolled up on. Things happen frequently in a game. So to have no lineup changes is a pretty impressive run.
Just tells you how tough it is to play football. Yeah, it's a kid's game. Yeah, you're getting paid to play. But seriously, how many people wind up on the shelf after a game? I think back to the game Saskatchewan versus Ottawa. two people broke bones in that football game for the Ottawa RedBlacks, one being their third down snapper on a play that just was a freak play. I do wonder sometimes, especially if you're a veteran player, how do you approach your 8th, 9th, and 10th season, knowing that at any moment, if you tackle the wrong way, if you get caught up in something, you could be on the shelf for weeks at a time. And I think of Reggie Bagleton, who made a block in Toronto at the beginning of last season and still hasn't come back.
Oftentimes a collision that looks like the worst one, guys pop up and move on. And case in point to that, Zach Collaros got blindsided in that game last week against the Ottawa RedBlacks. Just coming off of the injured list, suffering from whiplash previously, I was certainly holding my breath at that play. He missed 4 offensive snaps and he was back on the field, led the team to victory. That was a big sigh of relief. But you look at even somebody like Bo Levi Mitchell and the injuries that have happened to him since he's been in Hamilton. A short yardage play resulted in a leg injury. A sack by Jake Serezna resulted in a broken leg that he's still recovering from right now. Those don't always look like the most violent collision, but sometimes it's the way a guy lands, his foot sticks in the turf and twists a certain way, and that's what causes these injuries.
In the NFL, 92% of players have voted in favor of having grass as their field of choice. We had the World Cup. We had some stadiums in the United States that don't normally have grass for the World Cup, and yet it was all ripped up and taken out. And BC was another place where that happened. And they did a ton of testing, and this is something that I thought was fascinating. What happens when you stick your cleat into the ground, grass versus turf? And it's weird because a lot of people call grass turf, but for our purposes, it's going to be the artificial variety. What happens and what they found, and this is something that I've always believed, is that with an impact on grass, when you stop, press, and turn in grass, the ground gives. It moves, and so all the tension goes through into the ground and gets absorbed by that ground buckling. Where with artificial turf, there's way less of that tension being released into the ground, so it comes back up the leg. And that's why we see Achilles, we see knee injuries, we see so much more, I do think, and studies have pretty much borne this out anyway, on artificial turf, even though the changes in artificial turf have been fantastic. Quality, the softness, everything that you ask from it, as close to grass as they can get, but it's just not grass. And again, you go back to the injury form factor. What causes injuries?
Some of the changes they've made have been to integrate natural grass in mixed with the turf, and I think that helps as well. But you're right, it does not replicate the root system and dirt essentially under the grass, which allows the ground to give away. It can cause some traction issues, especially in cold weather or rainy weather, that you don't experience the same way on an artificial turf. And from that maintenance perspective, it's a factor why teams have gone away from it. The true spirit of football, if you want to go back that far, is a game played on grass. We've seen mud bowls, we've seen ice bowls, we've seen snow bowls, all played on a natural surface. They can be entertaining. They don't always make for the best quality of football, but from that safety perspective, I think you've hit the nail on the head as well. It's a lot safer to have that ground shift the way it does as opposed to catching in the artificial turf.
The Welsh National Stadium captures rainwater from the roof, funnels it down to tubs downstairs, and then waters the grass on the inside. They have LED lights that mimic the type of radiation that's required for grass to grow. And they just, after a game, immediately go into their mode of getting this done and start moving these tracks around, watering the pitch. The only thing that you concern yourself with then is humidity in the building. How do you evacuate that? I've been watching Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, and a lot of the innovations that they've done there. There also have been some serious complaints about what they did there. But one of the things that they've done is capture water from the roof. They're trying to funnel snow to A, evacuate the roof, but B, also use that water for other purposes in the building. This type of technology, which is so simple, it's basically rain, snow, and gravity, some heat and tubs, and a pump at the bottom to move it back onto the field. Why we can't have like the Welsh National Stadium, what Toronto has is a mix of weave and grass. Why not do that? Why not have that and cut down injuries even further?
My best guess is that it comes down to dollars and cents and the expense of maintaining that. I
don't think it's the expense of maintaining. I think it's the expense of setting it up. Because when Green Bay did it, and they've got an underground heating system for the grass, because of course it gets cold there just like it does on the prairies in Canada. That's where you spend your money. It's all up front. Rainwater doesn't cost you anything. Maybe, yes, okay, keeping the heat on the field will cost, but that's about it. And they may be using that anyway on artificial turf because you want that as a good surface if it's a cold weather game.
Now, you mentioned the Welsh National Stadium and also in the NFL, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, State Farm Stadium in Arizona, both actually roll their grass out of the dome stadium so it can soak up natural sunlight and then is rolled back in and applied for game day as well. There are certainly ways to do it. Real Madrid, the Spanish soccer team, actually has a vertical system where the grass turf rolls and splits into sections and lowers down underneath the stadium into a greenhouse and is maintained that way and is reinstalled in sections. I think you're right. The infrastructure to set something like this up is the cost variance that is prohibitive. And with the newest stadiums in the CFL not taking that into consideration when they were built, it's a bit tougher to retrofit now.
Wembley is another one where they take the field and they drop it down below and manage it downstairs and then bring it back up for game day. That's in London, England. It was a missed opportunity, but you remember too, when Hamilton built their stadium, when Saskatchewan built theirs, Winnipeg built theirs, BMO was built, there was still this sort of belief system that the CFL would be playing deep into end of November, typically. Well, that's moving. That's all moving towards the spring. And the CFL is going to be a spring, summer, fall league. If you've got a better growing season outside, why not take advantage of it? And I know it's going to be a cost for the retrofit, and you've got to figure out, and especially it's about pumping that water and keeping that grass warm on cold weather days. That's the two biggest problems that anybody faces. Most of these stadiums, other than BC Place, are not domed, so humidity won't be an issue. I don't see this as a massive problem. It's just your initial startup input. This is how they would struggle, because it's going to cost $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, maybe $10 million to do this. And how do you convince a local government who says, well, wait a minute, I want that stadium to be used for stadium events such as concerts, monster trucks, you name it. I want a billion other things to go on there. So grass just won't be the best surface for any of that.
That's a big part of it as well, is these stadiums need to be multi-purpose and host a variety of events to be somewhat cost sustainable. It will be something to watch as teams look at new venues. The Calgary Stampeders, for one, there's talk of something ongoing with a new stadium there as McMahon kind of ages out. We haven't really seen concepts for that of what a new stadium will be. I just wonder, I know there was a lot of pressure for Edmonton to go away from natural grass because they were kind of the last venue that still had it. And to be consistent with everybody, they did install turf a few years ago. Could we see trends start to go back to natural grass as we talk about these other stadiums across the world that have figured out how to do it successfully?
We're getting into a universe in that weather, especially in a lot of places on the planet, is getting drier. You're going to have some sort of xeriscape grass anyway if you want to have grass to grow anywhere. And all the time that this goes on, there's going to be people that say, well, wait a tick, why don't we develop a grass that doesn't need anywhere near the amount of water, has deeper roots so it can withstand drought far better, and is tough, like really tough to chunk apart. Like if you're sliding on the field, that you're not going to rip up the grass as you go through it, that you're actually going to slide over top of it. Maybe the NFL will lead, or maybe the CFL will lead. One of the two will say, look, this has to be done. But already we've seen Wales, we've seen BMO, we've seen Wembley, we've seen Allegiant and State Farm Stadium in Phoenix. They've all had creative ideas to address this. It just takes energy, willpower, creativity, and an agenda to get it done.
Keeping on the theme of stadiums and design, the Buffalo Bills had their first preseason game in their new $2.5 billion stadium. There's been some concerns raised by fans about a few issues, from sight lines to weather protection. It's an interesting time in Buffalo, and the first reports, there's some people not too happy with that shiny new stadium.
It has raised some concern, and it has raised some angst among especially patrons that are sitting in the higher sections of the stadium. In terms of the roof, the idea was that you were going to protect some of the crowd, but not much of it. They wanted the elements in Buffalo to be a part of the football game. Therefore, you weren't going to have a roof that was going to extend all the way to the field. That was a given. That part, I think most people can live with. The other thought was that there was going to be, as they do in Los Angeles, have that big stadium video board sitting over the middle of the field. And Buffalo made a conscious decision not to have that because they wanted you to watch the play, not the video board. So they're the opposite ends in the end zones up above. I kind of like that attitude. The ones that are getting more press, and probably rightly so, is the way they've constructed the concourses in front of the stands. So basically the passageways that you have, there's plexiglass and there's steel tubing, and it gives you an obstructed view of the field. There's several places that I've seen on YouTube where people are trying to look through to the field of play, and there's a bar here and a bar here and another one here, and then there might be a sheen off the plexiglass. It makes it very difficult if you're in the first couple of rows right behind it. The other one is up in the upper echelons where I'm not sure what the piece is. It might be actually the video scoreboard, where people are blocked and they can't see from the 15-yard line in.
The Bills are going to have to figure this out to keep people happy, especially those that have bought season tickets. And I know that glare off the plexiglass is a concern for some season ticket holders. When the sun is in a certain position, you're getting a reflection of the stands and it's obstructing the view of the field. And certainly the one where the hand railing is coming across, it's a metal railing with some cables running through as well. That seriously obstructs. Interestingly, we saw a little bit in Hamilton this year where they've erected a new patio structure in one end zone, which is blocking the view for some people in the stands, their view of the scoreboard and screen, and other people in the stands getting a little bit of an obstruction trying to view the field. It's not unheard of, but it's something that has gotten a lot better over time. We look at some of the old hockey arenas and some of the old Major League Baseball stadiums that had pillars and beams in people's way. They've improved that fan experience to try to do away from it. They haven't hit it 100% yet.
Well, they've had cantilever stadiums, which is basically the ones that you see everywhere nowadays, where you don't have these big columns staring you in the face as you look towards the football field. That technology has been around for, I would say, about 80 years. I think the angst coming from some of the fans is that when they saw the virtual rendering of where their seat would be, that some of these things weren't always visible to them, that the way the program was rendered, you couldn't tell if this was going to be a problem or not. People in the United States, and especially with the NFL, they get these what they call personal seat licenses, which basically gives you the right to the seat. You pay an upfront fee to have that seat or that block of seats become yours. Then you have to pay for your season tickets on top of that. If I'm paying for a PSL and I'm obstructed, I think I would be choked. And if you're spending 2 point whatever billion on a stadium, can't you engineer or make an architectural drawing that would preclude any visible obstructions? I think of Mosaic, which they built for about $350 million. I don't know if anyone is obstructed in that stadium.
And linking this back to the CFL as well, the seating chart renderings are starting to come out, looking at what the 2027 field configurations are going to be. And it's not obstructed views that are the concern. It's moving the field away from you. And especially those people that have seats currently on the goal line or in the corners of the end zone, as those end zones shrink and the field itself shrinks by 10 yards, it's pulling that gameplay action away.
It's a 20-yard shrink overall, if you want to call it that, which is 5 off of each end zone and 10, as you said, out of the middle of the field. So it's a 20-yard change. So 10 yards on either side of midfield. I think of the pill zone in Saskatchewan, where they are going to be 10 yards further away. What do you do with that space? Or the closed end at the other end? What does Winnipeg do? All these stadiums that were built and Hamilton that were built in the last 15 years, you're kind of going, thanks. Now we have to reconfig. And that's not exactly easy. Well, that's a lot of concrete.
It is. And do you look at even some fold away bleachers to come down, but you lose the comfort of the seats that they have now with the integrated cup holders, a bit more leg room, all those sorts of comforts that they've brought into new stadium design. There's ways to get people back closer to the field, but it's either going to be cheap and uncomfortable or very, very expensive to do it.
I'm thinking of Edmonton. They're ones that have done it really well, where they have, and Ottawa too, where they have patios in the end zones. That's another way to do it. And sometimes the players jump the fence and hang out with you for a second. Once they've scored a touchdown, they tend to want to celebrate with whomever's in the neighborhood. That's a way to do it. But I just worry that for those people that have bought season tickets and are sitting at the back of the end zone and like it there because the play comes to them, now that play is going to be 10 yards further away. That goalpost, which was less of an obstruction because it was in the field of play, now is going to be at the back of the end zone and staring you in the face. I'm not as adamantly opposed as what I once was to all of this. Fortunately, my seats are closer to midfield. I'm not really clear on how I'll be reconfigured in this process. Will I be at the 38-yard line? Will I stay at the 44, where I am now? I don't know how the shrinking works. Like, do they say for the riders, do they move it all to one end, move it 10 yards this way just to make it closer to the closed end, and then do a lot more with the pill zone?
That was my thought as well. Is it all going to shrink equally from both sides, or do they look at where it's most beneficial to keep the back of the end zone where it currently is and condense everything else towards it? That's something to watch for sure. And for Mosaic Stadium in particular, it might make more sense, as you say, to keep the north end zone where it is now, move the pill zone towards it and shrink that way.
Again, that's a lot of concrete. I don't know what you do with the pill zone as it's configured. I know Winnipeg, I had talked to one of their representatives a couple of years ago when they saw this, when they came to Mosaic for the first time. He made mention that they wanted to do the same thing in Winnipeg. Maybe this will give them the opportunity. Now that the field has moved away, now you can do something in the end zones. You can get creative with this. It's just, I feel bad for the ones that have a season ticket that are just going to be that much further away. You just can't physically get a jack under it, pick it up and move it and then set it back down again. Those fields or those stadiums are fixed. And what about Hamilton, who's making all of these changes in their one end zone? Was this in mind with the changes that are coming?
It's possible. Again, we kind of have to wait and see what everything looks like. Princess Auto Stadium sent out a kind of early rendering of what that's going to look like. And it's already got some fans concerned given where their seats are currently situated.
It's going to dislocate a lot of people. You cannot escape that. I mean, you try to countenance everything when you're in these meetings, trying to sort out how do we change the game so that we can make the field fit in more stadiums, so that if we ever do expand to Quebec, which may be happening sooner than we think, Ville de Quebec, which is a city in the province of Quebec. If they decide to go there and that footprint is smaller, then it makes it much easier. If you go to Halifax, if you go to Windsor, when they were going through all of this last year and discussing this and bringing this forward, did anyone say, well, we're going to tick off a lot of the fan base, because if you were at the 30 and we move that field up another 5 yards, now you're at the 25. If you're at the goal line, you're no longer at the goal line. You're probably 5 yards deep in the end zone.
Third down.
Week 12 of the CFL season is upon us, and once again, we have a team with a double-digit point spread in their favor. The Ottawa RedBlacks head to Montreal looking for their first win. It's going to be a tough one, as the Alouettes are a 12.5-point favorite at Percival Molson Stadium.
Ouch. Ouch. And I just think of that Ryan Dinwiddie talking about how they have to stay focused and they have to carry a good positive vibe forward. And then you get the line coming out. And at one point it was at 13.5 in favor of Montreal. It just got to hurt. There's just no respect for the Ottawa RedBlacks right now.
There's not. And I have to lean towards Montreal not only winning this game, but covering that 12.5-point spread. I think from what we've seen from Davis Alexander and that offense, they are exciting to watch. The home crowd's going to be fired up in Montreal as well. I think the Alouettes win this one running away.
It's hard to argue that. Yes, they had that preseason game where they actually defeated Montreal in Montreal, but the Alouettes weren't playing half of their starters. Like, you think about this. This is an 0-9 team playing against an 8-1 team. You couldn't be more disparate unless the Alouettes were undefeated themselves at this point in the season. There have been 12 teams that have started off 0-9. 4 of the 12 won their 10th game. I don't believe that Ottawa can win this football game. And especially relative to them, it's a short week because they were in Winnipeg. They had to fly home. They lose the travel day. They lose a day of practice. Montreal, of course, is coming off the bye. Could you have a worse storm against the RedBlacks? Grudgingly, I'm going to accept that the Alouettes can beat them by 13.5. That's a big, or 12.5. That's a big ask.
It is, and I often have a hard time with a spread that big. But in this situation, given where these two are in the standings so far in the season, and like you said, Montreal's going to be rested coming off that bye, I see this one potentially getting out of hand for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Friday Night Football, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers head to Edmonton to take on the Elks. Edmonton is a 5.5-point favorite at home in Commonwealth Stadium. Both teams coming off of a win. Where do you see this one landing?
I like the Elks at home. After what they showed against Toronto last week, and especially how they took over in that second half, they got the turnovers they needed. They got scores on defense. Cody Fajardo found Justin Rankin, not so much running the football, but passing it to him. Toronto wasn't that bad a team going in. Now, Edmonton, relative to them, if they win, they stay ahead of Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has that game in hand. So the best that they could be is tied. And you think about that game that's coming up at the end of the season in Regina, that could decide first place. That's pretty cool. BC and Winnipeg may still have something to say about that. For the short term, I look at Winnipeg and they did not impress me against Ottawa. They really didn't. Yeah, Brady Oliveira got his rushing in the first half and got some passing out of the backfield. They weren't putting Ottawa away at that point. And this is kind of what I worry about with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, is that so long as Brady Oliveira carries the narrative, they're going to focus on him. And I think it's actually to the detriment of the team, because they're not doing other things that they could be doing with the football. If you have to feed, as he said at halftime, feed everybody on the team, which meant feed me, I just don't see how that's going to be a positive effect in the long run. How long is it in that locker room before someone walks up to him and says, just shut up?
I know what you're saying about Winnipeg failing to put Ottawa away. One thing I was impressed with, actually, not just the Brady Oliveira's touches, but I think Zach Collaros did a good job of of finding different receivers. Nick Dembski had 6 catches. Tim White had 6 catches. Ontario Wilson was targeted 5 times and dropped one of the easiest touchdown passes you will see. He did not have a catch, but Tommy Neal got involved in the play as well. This is what happens when the Bombers get rolling, is they don't lean on one receiver. Collaros spreads that ball around and finds different people. I do still think the Edmonton Elks win this game at home. I don't think they cover the 5.5 point spread. Trey Vauvel, Sergio Castillo, and that Winnipeg special team squad is in the upper echelon of the CFL. So if they continue to convert those long field goal opportunities and flip field position on a strong Vauvel return, the Bombers have a chance. And I think that's what's going to keep things close. Willie Jefferson seems a little bit rejuvenated as well. He's 6 sacks, 5 pass knockdowns so far this season. Tops or near the top in the league in both of those categories. We've seen him give Cody Fajardo fits in the past as well. Closer than you think. Edmonton still pulls off the win, but it's within a field goal.
I don't think it's going to be as close as you would hope. I look at the Elks, and I think that at home especially, now that they've set themselves straight after a couple of losses, this team is sky high in terms of confidence. Don't forget, they went into Winnipeg and they beat them in Winnipeg earlier this season, so they know what to do and how to do it. Zach Collaros, 21 of 31 for 222 in that game against Ottawa. That's not going to scare anybody. That's Jake Mayer numbers in the early part of the season. Now, granted, I don't know how beat up Collaros was after that hit, and I with you, I didn't think he'd be coming back after that shot. I'm impressed that he had the courage to come back, but he still didn't look really right. And in that case, that's where Brady Oliveira can really help. The reason why he got lit up is because Brady Oliveira decided to take off out of the backfield instead of realizing there was a mismatch along the line and they were outnumbered.
That's very true. And I know the early rumblings were that Stanley Bryant blew the coverage on that one. He did not. There was another blitzer that came to the inside that Bryant picked up. That 6th man at the line was free off that side because, as you said, Brady went wandering out into the flats, hoping to pick up a pass. Collaros didn't pick up the blitz in time, got blindsided by it. Oftentimes, Brady Oliveira is one of the best blocking backs in the league. He was not that on this play, and it almost cost their quarterback the rest of the season.
Again, I go back to the great Ronnie Lancaster, who said, what's the 3 jobs of a running back? Number 1, blocking for your quarterback. Number 2, running. Number 3, catching the football. Wes Cates was probably the best in the last 20 years at protecting the quarterback. You do not want to worry about your blind side, and that's why you have a running back there to protect you. And Zach Collaros did not expect anybody to be coming from over there because I'm sure in his mind, Oliveira had to pick up that extra person.
Saturday sees the QEW series as the Hamilton Tiger Cats head to Toronto to take on the Argonauts. Chad Kelly and the Argos are a 4.5 point favorite at home. As we mentioned earlier, we saw Harrison Frost, we saw Trey Ford combined to pull off the upset victory against Saskatchewan last week. Does that momentum continue, or does Toronto shut them down?
What happens at quarterback? Who do you want to start? Both quarterbacks played well against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. In fact, they humbled the Saskatchewan Roughriders in that second half. The Riders didn't get a first down in the fourth quarter. They didn't score a point. They didn't do anything. And it's the first time all season that Saskatchewan has blown a third quarter lead. Hamilton Tiger Cats defense is scary. The Toronto Argonauts offense is equally as scary. Oof. I like the Argonauts because it's a home game in front of BMO. They had a decent crowd last time. I'm sure they're going to have a big crowd this time. How do you stop Chad Kelly unless he's just having a really off night?
I have to agree with you on this one. DeMonte Coxey has really been a key component of that Toronto offense this year as well. Again, another quarterback in Chad Kelly that can spread the ball around and find different receivers. Their defense has played well at times as well. I think their defense has been a little bit better than a lot of people anticipated that they were going to be. For those reasons, I like the Argonauts minus the 4.5. I don't think they have any issue covering that. Tyler Common has been another bright light on that Argonauts offense, catching key passes and touchdowns when called upon as well. So I think there's a lot of components that can work with Chad Kelly to boost that offense. We saw Sean Lemon come out of retirement, step in and provide some stability and get a couple of sacks on that defensive line as well.
Let's not forget Jagarrett Davis, who's also come in, and part of the reason why Lemon's getting sacks is because Jagarrett Davis is occupying two people.
I agree with you. I don't think Hamilton's going to get blown out of the water, but I could see a touchdown spread victory for the Argonauts.
Who do you start at quarterback? Harrison Frost, who left with injury against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, or is it Mr. Trey Ford, who brought them back and won the football game? Not 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago on this podcast, I thought that Trey Ford had played himself off that team. He looked good against Saskatchewan.
He did. If I'm Scott Milanovic,
who hasn't been at practice and has been missing for personal reasons, but is expected to be back with the team.
Yes, if I'm Scott Milanovic, who hopefully will be back for this Week 12 start, I'm looking at Harrison Frost if he came through relatively unscathed. He did leave the game due to injury. If he's able to go, I think I go back with him. But don't be afraid to run some series with Trey Ford, or if Harrison Frost struggles, to make that change. Looking at the stats between the two of them, Frost was 12 of 16 for 112 yards and a touchdown. Trey Ford came in, went 13 of 17 for 151 and a touchdown, as well as scampering for 38 yards on 4 carries. Both of them did some things on offense that really helped put the Rough Riders away.
I'm with you too. I think Frost reads defenses just a little bit quicker, and he's more willing to throw the football into tighter spaces.
Finishing off the week on Sunday, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in BC to take on the Lions. The Lions have rolled off 3 straight victories to climb back into the playoff picture in the West. The Riders are trying to keep pace with the Edmonton Elks at the top of the standings. The home team is favored by 1.5 points in Vancouver. This one's pretty much a pick 'em.
It is on paper, but I think the BC Lions are going to hand it to the Rough Riders. Trevor Harris, for the first time all season, looked pretty ordinary against Hamilton. And in that fourth quarter, he was thinking more about what that defensive line was going to do rather than trying to find receivers. And he threw some bad balls, and he could have been picked several more times. He throws for 207 yards and 2 interceptions against the Tiger Cats. Not stellar numbers for a guy that was in the MOP discussion. He is 40 years old, and every shot he takes, you pile it on top of all the other ones he's taken throughout his career. How does that play out? I kind of think that the Lions, who went into Calgary, and again, they play well in Calgary for whatever reason. They've taken 6 out of 7 from the Stamps in Calgary. That's a Nathan Rourke thing. The Rough Riders, given all of the injuries that they have, the only 2 players that may be coming back for this football game, James Letcher Jr. and Ali Saad. Now, Saad plays on the defensive line, could be very important. James Letcher Jr., of course, the return game. Daniel Weeb has done well. He's not as quick as James Letcher Jr. 2 starting receivers that are all-stars that are not going to be playing again. It's a lot to ask. The Lions will cover easily.
I like the Lions as well. I don't know if I'm as confident in a big margin of victory as you are, but those injuries are starting to take their toll on the Saskatchewan Roughriders receiving core and their offense as a whole. Keyshawn Johnson can't do it all alone, and right now...
And he left the football game against Hamilton for a while with an injury. How healthy is he?
Exactly. So with Keon Schaefer-Baker and Sam Emelis on the injured list right now, that's a lot of sure-handed catches that aren't in that lineup anymore for Trevor Harris. The BC Lions, as I said, they've kind of hit their stride. Nathan Rourke looks a lot more comfortable back at the helm, coming back from that shoulder injury. I like the Lions, and with a couple of teams this week, if BC wins, if Winnipeg wins, those standings in the West tighten up a lot, and it's going to be a real sprint to the finish in the second half of the season. Calgary, as we mentioned earlier, gets the Ottawa RedBlacks twice in the second half. They're not out of the picture by any means either. There's those big matches coming up, Labor Day weekend and the follow-up, the Edmonton-Calgary series and the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan series. This West Division is going to be fun to watch down the stretch.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit CFL.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.